Dare2Draw studio chat. This is where we sit down with a well-established talent in the comics industry to find out just what it takes to do what they do, how to excel in the technical and artistic aspects of the medium, and also how to hold together a long and successful career, and maybe pull back the curtain a bit to find out just what it's like to be them. This chat is brought to you by Dare2Draw Studios, the Will and Ann Eisner Family Foundation, and Accent UK Comics, dedicated to creating and producing new opportunities for cartoonists. Our guest tonight has had an exceptional career by any measure, from drawing Aquaman for DC back at the dawn of the Silver Age of comics, to drawing Mermaid Man in the SpongeBob SquarePants comic 63 years later. In between, she lent her engaging line work to drawing Batman, Superman, Green Arrow, the Fantastic Four, The Simpsons, the Super Friends, and co-creating one of the oddest superheroes, Metamorpho. She took over drawing Brenda Starr from creator Dale Mesick and drew that newspaper strip for 15 years. She also took time off from comics to write and draw children's books and to write a well-regarded book on Gnostic philosophy. She's known to be a modest person, and clearly she has much to be modest about. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest this evening is Ramona Fradon. Hi, Ramona. Thanks for joining us. So what's the first thing you remember drawing?
Well, I've always, for some reason, I know, it was probably Popeye. I used to copy Popeye all the time. But it was probably a leg. I used to draw starting with the legs all the time, and that's what I can remember. I remember drawing a leg, that's all.
Just an
But
amorphous
when I was
leg.
very young, I mean like 3 or 4, we lived in Chicago, and my mother used to take us to the Art Institute to a little sketch class in the basement of the Institute. At least this is my recollection. And there were Greek statues there, things like that, busts and things, and we sketched them at 4. I didn't know why I was there, but I do remember that for some reason. And it was, you know, I got early training apparently.
Yeah, so your parents were very encouraging of the arts with you.
Yeah, especially my father. He was a lettering man, a commercial lettering man, and he decided I was going to be the artist in the family. At a very early age, he decided that, and so, I mean, we always had, he used to work at home, so I was right off the bat. I was familiar with all of the tools that he used, the triangles and pens, and you know, ink and whiteout and all that stuff. So, and it was natural for me to draw all the time. I just drew like doodling. It was nothing, I don't think I was ever trying to do anything. It was just absent-minded doodling because it was just part of growing up in my family. Excuse me.
Wow.
So that's what I remember.
Yeah.
Sketching Greek statues in a basement somewhere.
Yeah, well, it's great that you were able to have that background at home because, you know, nowadays it seems, you know, the arts are becoming less and less valued in schools, and arts programs are sort of first on the chopping block to get cut. How do you feel about that, coming from an artistic background yourself?
Well, I think it's a shame. I mean, I think the arts are absolutely indispensable for a civilized society. It tends to, I think it helps people see more holistically and to see patterns and to be receptive, which is a really important thing, to be soft and receptive and take in colors and shapes and patterns. I think it's indispensable, and the same thing with music. And it's a shame that this culture, it seems as though we drop the arts first before anything else, and it's, I think, just to our detriment.
Yeah, for sure. Well, but when did you know that you really wanted to pursue art as a vocation beyond just sketching and having fun with it as a child?
I never did. I'm afraid I never had any real motivation. What happened was I went to, I mean, because my father wanted me to be an artist, I didn't take studying very seriously. I thought, well, I'm going to art school, it doesn't matter. And then I went to art school, and it just almost automatically. And so I really didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. But when I was in art school, I met my husband, who was an aspiring New Yorker cartoonist. And he encouraged me to draw, to do comics. And so I even tried thinking of gags a few times, and I wasn't very good at that. And he and I did a couple of strips together. We thought, well, maybe we'll sell something to the newspapers, you know. And we did some really good stuff then. And I discovered at that point, even though art school is all about fine arts and it's very snobby, and you would not mention that you wanted to be a cartoonist in art school, I learned, for some reason, I knew how to draw comics. I grew up looking at the newspaper strips, you know, in the 30s, all of the great drawing in those early strips, the Little Orphan Annie and, you know, Maggie and Jiggs and just all of them, Flash Gordon. And so I knew alley-oop, my God. I've often thought that my brain was made up of alley-oop's stomach muscles and little Abner's eyebrows, and I mean, and you know, all the graphic sounds that people made, like the oofs and the pows and the things, so that when I started doing it, I just knew what to do. I just knew. And then this friend of ours who was he worked for Walt Kelly later on, a fellow named George Ward. I think he was inking. He was lettering comics at the time, and he saw my work and he said, you should go up and get a job doing, you know, try and get a job doing comics. So I didn't, you know, I thought, well, why not? He told us about Joe Maneely, who was making, like, I mean, a lot of money for that time, maybe $20,000 a year or something. He was very fast, apparently. And so I thought, well, why not? I was working in Bloomingdale's basement at the time, selling men's underwear.
So that was a step up then.
Yeah,
comics was a step up.
It was definitely an improvement. So that's how I got started in comics, really.
Well, it's interesting because you went to Parsons originally. I think you were going to pursue fashion design.
Yeah, well, that wasn't my father's
That's your
idea.
father's influence. But then you quit to join the Art Students League. And why did you switch schools then?
Well, I had some idea that I should learn to draw. And at Parsons, there was a big emphasis on technique. Principles of design, yeah, but mostly technique. We had a drawing class. I think we had a nude model that we drew from maybe two or three mornings a week. But it was a farce because across the street from where we were, there was a woman who used to undress in the window every morning at 9 o'clock when we were in class. So the whole class would leave the nude model and go, you know, look at, and I thought, well, it was fun, you know, it was a lot of fun, but I thought I need to learn to draw, and this isn't,
it's not drawing.
Isn't happening.
So Art Students League had more for you
in
that sense.
The League is a wonderful school. It's a wonderful school, not just as a fine arts school, but it produced a lot of New Yorker cartoonists and illustrators, you know, beyond, you know, besides fine artists. And it was, the emphasis was on learning how to draw and learning how to paint and the fundamentals of art and the exposure to art history. It was just invaluable, I think. I mean, anybody who asks me, who wants to be an artist and asks me what to do, I say, learn to draw, learn to articulate a figure, and then you can go from there, you know. So it was just a wonderful experience.
Well, you know, what teachers did you have at the League? Do you remember anybody specifically who had an influence on how you developed as an artist?
I remember particularly Robert Johnson, and I can't remember, there were two of them. I can't tell you which one it was, but he taught a drawing class, and he emphasized quick sketches. I mean, that was his method. We did 30-second sketches and 1-minute sketches, and occasionally we did studies, you know, but I just can't tell anybody how valuable an experience that is to be able to get the full intention of the figure, you know, to see it as a whole, you know, and to feel the action. It was a real training for drawing comic books, for sure.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you talked a bit about how you sort of moved into comics through your personal associations, but before you took that direction, what did you hope to pursue after the League? Did you have any idea of a career direction?
No, I had none. I had no ambition, really, at all. I mean, I'm serious. I should have been steered to go to college because that was ultimately my major interest, was learning, you know, and writing, and so. But you know, it didn't work out that way.
Didn't work out in that order.
Yeah.
So yeah, you didn't have any formal training, as you said, in cartooning and comics.
No.
So how did you sort of develop those skills? Like, was there anyone whose work you looked to for inspiration or guidance?
I just remembered all those old wonderful comics.
It was the visual language you had from the newspaper strips.
I just used to really devour them. My father would come home and the first thing I'd say is, "Where's the Daily News or the whatever paper?" And yeah, I just used to pore over them, just study them. And the funny thing is, the one strip I never read or liked was Brenda Starr. I had no idea what was in store for me.
Well, before we get to that, you did work for Timely and then DC a little bit before taking over Aquaman as a backup strip for Superboy and Adventure Comics in the early 50s. But you've said previously you weren't confident in your comic skills early on. So was Aquaman kind of where you found your niche there?
Yeah. I learned on the job for sure. Somebody brought me a page of Aquaman. He bought it years ago apparently, and it weighed about 5 pounds with rubber cemented paste ups and white out, and I mean, it's just, I really struggled to do those early. Actually, I had about a year of practicing on the fillers that I did. I did westerns and gangbusters and a couple of maybe romance comics. There were still a few around then, so I did have, you know, a chance to practice before I started doing Aquaman.
Right.
But it was all on the job training. I'd never inked before. I'd never really created a scene before. In art school, we just didn't, you know, I just didn't have the occasion to do that. So I struggled. The hardest part was to get the faces to look alike. And I think it would take me, say, maybe a week to do a page at that point. You know, I was just struggling and changing it, and until I finally learned. And then I had to learn how to ink. I didn't know whether I should use a brush or a pen or. I mean, I just didn't know anything, and it was all, you know, it was all on the job training.
Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned inking because, you know, the pencil drawings I've seen of yours, they've got such a beautiful, warm quality to them, and it kind of seems like it's almost a shame to ink it.
Yeah.
But what do you think the secret of good inking is, in your experience?
You know, I don't think I ever learned. I don't consider myself a good inker. Penciling, I love penciling. It's like painting with a pencil, you know. And inking has always seemed kind of redundant to me. It's who needs it, you know? Why ruin a drawing with inking? That's the way it feels. But I did ink Aquaman, and I inked the early fillers that I did. And later on, I inked with the mysteries when I worked with Joe Orlando. He taught me a lot about inking, actually. And then I inked Brenda the whole time.
Right.
So I did a lot, but I never considered myself an inker.
Doing a lot more than maybe
you
would have liked?
Yeah.
Were there other people who inked your work that maybe you felt enhanced it in some way, even if you felt like you never got their inking
I think they all, except what was his name? Come on, you know the name. You know his name. Who was the one who did the little noses? And every face looked alike when he finished inking it, and if he didn't feel like doing the backgrounds, he'd erase it. I mean,
really?
What was his name? Coletta. There you go. That's it.
Oh boy.
It was awful to have him ink this stuff. Well, I know other people felt that way. It was kind of notorious.
Wow.
But I had some wonderful inkers. I think they all improved my work tremendously, especially who was it, Charlie Paris, I think, did Metamorpho.
Metamorpho, yeah.
He really gave it that energy, you know, kind of an angularity and energy. And Bob Smith did wonderful work on Super Friends. So yeah, I've admired the inkers, and I mean somebody like Joe Sinnott.
Sinnott, right?
He inked. I did a Fantastic Four, and Joe inked it, fortunately, because he saved it. Because everything looks like Joe Sinnott when he finishes inking it, you know. So yeah, he's a wonderful inker.
Excellent.
So,
well, and it was George Kasdan?
Kashdan. Yeah.
George Kashdan was your editor on Aquaman and then on Metamorpho. Was he supportive of your career?
He was lovely. I love George. I never thought he should be in comics. There was something, you know, but he was very good at it.
Why shouldn't he be in comics?
He was like too smart, you know. He was an intellectual, sensitive guy, you know.
Maybe they need more of that. Who knows?
But he, you know, his brother was, I think, an editor, an artist, I'm not sure. So it was natural for him to be in the business. And he always seemed so nice, and I was amazed to read an interview of him in, what was that magazine? One in Roy Thomas's magazine. I had no idea he had so many like critical views of some of the people in the business. Oh, he was really, but he never said anything to me like that at all. We talked about books and, you know, things like that. He was a good friend, and I never got any editing, oddly enough, in all the years that I did comics. I'll tell you later, I've been getting some editing lately. Actually, you know, well, this is a long story.
All right. We'll come back to that. We'll remember this.
All right.
So Metamorpho, talking of Metamorpho, he did not, we have him here. He did not look like a traditional hero of the time at all, like a handsome human man with superpowers. He had sort of a monstrous, non-human quality to him. He was sort of atypical. What was that like for you, approaching a character like that?
Well, since I created him, I felt he was okay. But yeah, I mean, when I think about it now, he had a skull-like face, and he would look like he had pimples on one side, and you know, he was just a mess. But I thought it was really daring of Bob Haney to do that, you know. But it was the '60s, and I guess there was already who's the guy with the scales? What's his name with the?
No.
In Fantastic Four.
Oh yeah, the Thing.
The Thing,
yeah,
you know, he was a sensitive fellow, and but this was different. I mean, this was just audacious, I think, to make her this beautiful heiress, you know, this blonde, beautiful heiress that she loved him no matter
Sapphire.
what. Even
Sapphire Stag.
Yeah, Sapphire Stag. That no matter what, she loved Metamorpho or Rex.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting you bring her up, because I thought what stood out for me looking over the work was the relationship between those two, between Rex, Metamorpho, and Sapphire.
That was a lot of fun, showing reactions and facial expressions and things of that sort. So it was a lot of fun, and Bob Haney, I think it was his best thing he ever did, you know. It was just wonderful. Well, and we used to bounce off of each other.
Right.
I mean, at the first time I read his script, I was going to say no. This was after I'd been out for about 7 years, and Roy Thomas called me and asked me to try this thing, and my first impulse was to say no, you know. But he gave me a rundown of the idea, and then he showed me a script that Bob Haney had done, and I thought, well, this is funny. I mean, I could have fun with this, so I agreed to do 4. To just start it out, you know, design the characters and get the things going for about 4 issues. And so that's what I did. I did about 8 covers after that. And it was just, it got funnier and funnier. But the first time I brought my drawings in, Bob laughed, you know, and that gave him ideas of what else to do. And then I'd read the next script, and that gave me ideas, and we were just building on each other. It was
that like
wonderful.
Your first real feeling of collaboration?
Yeah, it's the only one I've ever had, really. Yeah, this was just a magical thing. And it was too bad that I just couldn't see. I had a 2-year-old at that time. The poor little thing was clinging on my knee, meeting deadlines, so I couldn't do it.
You know, you worked on Super Friends for about 4 years, and that book seems kind of like more of a good fit for more humor, kid-friendly sensibilities.
Yeah.
Were you happy with your work on that?
I finally began to think I knew how to draw when I got around to Super Friends. Yeah, and I think it was good drawing when I look at it now. I learned after, and then Bob Smith's inking was so nice on that strip. But working on that with Nelson Bridwell was interesting because he really was a script man. I mean, he was interested in his scripts, and all of the writers, the letters that came in would be critiquing his scripts, and that was what he was interested in. There was never a letter that was published that had anything to do with drawing.
With the art.
It was all the script. And he designed all the costumes. I mean, he should get credit for everything that he did. He was meticulous. Not fun to work with.
I was going to say, what's that like to work under?
He was sort of humorless, He wasn't very communicative, but he was very communicative when it came to this button goes here. He's very, very
down to the minutia of
his characters, And he was he was really. And I learned somewhere that the DC really wasn't interested in doing that feature at all. They thought it was just a throwaway, and they were amazed that it really was successful. It lasted for quite a while.
Yeah, huge impact. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You've said previously that you can't really take superheroes seriously, but that you enjoyed humor comics. And it's interesting that the superheroes that you seem most comfortable with were sort of the less classically heroic looking. Like, was it easier maybe to draw Aquaman because he's more fantastical than sort of typical superhero?
He was hard for me to draw.
Was he?
Yeah, he still is.
What was hard about it?
He was sort of blank, I thought. I shouldn't say that.
I think it's okay now.
But, I really wasn't interested in drawing fish and...
No?
And in those days, there was no internet. I couldn't do research unless I ran, out to New York or somewhere to go to get a picture collection somewhere. So I had made up most of the fish, and I'm afraid they kind of look like it. But I just, I really wasn't interested. It was just a job. I was making some money, and I shouldn't say that because now looking back on Aquaman and seeing what they've done to him, I think, oh my God, he was such a wholesome, apple cheek kind of a guy, 50s sort of a guy, and now he's got hooks and beards and he looks psychotic, and it's terrible, So anyway,
some of the warmth was gone for you.
I'm fond of him now in retrospect. I really am fond of him.
Right.
And I like drawing, I like doing commissions of Aquaman now and Aqualad and Mira.
Well, how is your work on the newspaper daily different from a monthly comic? When you started drawing Brenda Starr, for instance, I imagine the timelines and the workflow and the approach is pretty different.
Yeah, it's hugely different. In the first place, the format is so different. You've got your set panels, and that's it. And on the dailies you have 3 panels, each time, and there tend to be a lot of close-ups. For some reason. I don't think it was my fault exactly, but that's what happens, and it gets, after a while, it's really hard to think of something new to do with a close-up, And then it's the sheer drudgery of it. It's 6 days a week. It wasn't 7 days a week. You just never got away from it.
Right.
It was relentless. And I remember I went to Europe a few times while I was working on it, and I had to hire somebody to get ahead.
Wow.
And even then, I would have to take the work with me and settle down somewhere near a FedEx office so that I could, mail it off. But
You hung in there for 15 years, though, doing this.
Yeah, it's true. And I left just when the pay scale changed at DC. It's
Timing.
I went from like 50, 60 a page to 250 a page just a week or two after I left, I think.
No. Well, the timing was just wrong on that.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
And then Brenda was on the way down when I took over. All the editors were trying to drop it, and women would write in, and occasionally they would save it, but it was not an exciting thing to do at the time. And then I had 3 different writers. Dale Messick started out writing the strip, and she had never apparently worked from a script herself because she was drawing and writing the thing. So she would send me a page of roughs, a whole page laid out. And so it was difficult for me to draw over her drawing. I had to sort of forget who I was and just do what was there. And I find it difficult to capture Brenda in the way that Dale created her. She was Brenda. I mean, Dale, if you looked at Dale, like, say, from here to across this room, she looked like she was like 30 years old, glamorous, long eyelashes, red hair, beautiful jewelry and beautiful clothes. And so she was Brenda. And she could articulate Brenda in a way that I couldn't, because she could, like, distort her. Sometimes Brenda was really weird looking, with big liver lips, and her nose would go off to the side, but it didn't matter. Right. Because she had
an intimacy with the character.
Yeah, she was working from
special.
Inside.
Right.
And I was working from the outside, so Brenda became more standard looking. I think in some ways she was better looking, but in other ways she was not nearly as dimensional as Brenda was.
As she had been.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And I know that Dale didn't like the way I drew her.
No?
So, yeah.
Well, there's that.
Yeah.
You hung on for a while, considering.
Yeah, she thought that I've forgotten what the details were, but then why would she? I changed her character, really.
Was she ever going to really appreciate the way someone else drew her baby?
So. Yeah,
probably not.
It's true. I don't think anybody drew Metamorpho the way I drew Metamorpho. So
Yeah.
So it goes that way.
It's tough to give your baby away in that sense, I imagine. Yeah.
But that was when I left comics, there was already a fandom, and there were already conventions, and there were fan letters. And when I started drawing Brenda, it was like being isolated. I never heard from anybody except shut-ins who said they were crippled and they wanted free drawings. And there must have been hundreds of them. And
it's an epidemic.
I mean, I guess it was a thing,
right.
that people did, that they were all, but that was the
Suspect some of that wasn't exactly above board,
yeah,
maybe?
I think it was. I mean, I think there were too many of them, really.
Right.
So, and then, so I felt isolated all the years I was doing it from fans. And then when I quit and started going to conventions, it was a revelation to me.
That's where you met the fans of Brenda?
Yeah. And not Brenda fans,
not Brenda.
the comic book fans. It's a whole different world, really.
Right.
And then I shouldn't get off on this, except Charles wanted. Anyway, when I was working on Brenda, I took over the script, so I was the person who received the what do you call the invoices, the royalty things, and I began to notice after a while that when the receipts went up, the production costs went up in parallel. It was like the receipts would go up, the production costs would go up, the receipts go down, and I thought there's something really weird going on here. So I got a lawyer and sued the Tribune Media.
Right.
It turns out they were, cooking the books.
Oh boy!
And figuring I wouldn't notice it, and so I forced them to give me a breakdown after a while of the receipts and the expenditures, and it stopped after that.
Wow.
So they're criminals. I mean, I'm happy to say that. on camera.
That's so rough, especially with the amount of work you were putting in there to think
I
that.
know. Yeah, they were criminals.
Oh boy.
They tried to get you to sign slave labor contracts.
Right.
And then I was paying half of Dale Messick's pension. That was
From
coming
your
out
salary?
Coming out of my salary.
Oh,
and
boy.
when I quit, June Brigman said she was still paying it because Dale swore she was going to live forever, and she did live to be, 94 or 5. So June Brigman was paying half of her salary, and then when Dale died, it didn't go up. She didn't get more money.
Really?
No, they had it.
That's pretty outrageous.
It's awful. I'm just happy to say this, so anybody who can hear it.
Yeah.
Terrible
Well,
people.
I think that's a struggle that a lot of artists have in general across media is getting properly paid for work and for rights. So,
it's true.
I mean, it's unfortunate it hasn't gotten in some ways better than what you experienced.
I know, but artists are too dumb to really be unionized and, fight for what they should.
Well, you semi-retired from comics in the 90s, but you've still lent your hand to some issues of, as you said, SpongeBob and the Simpsons comics that were reimagining your work. And now you sort of are mostly, as you mentioned before, working on commissions. With only occasional comics. So how's your relationship to your work different now? That sort of the nature of it's changed, you're more direct to
doing what you
consumer.
want to do is so different from drawing from a script. There's just no, it's like two different worlds. So I can pretty much draw what I want to draw. I get a whole batch of drawings together when I go to a convention, hoping nobody will ask me to draw while I'm there, but they do anyway. But so, I can pick and choose what I feel like drawing, and that makes a huge difference to me. And I don't have to ink it, although now I'm inking and coloring some things too.
Yeah.
But it's been a huge change.
Yeah.
This way I try harder now. I really
you find
think
the joy
hard,
of it more?
Yeah, to make it look like what I want it to look like. Whereas before I was just meeting a deadline, trying to fill up a page. So that's been a big change.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to mention that we were talking about editing.
Editing, right. You
before,
said there's some
and
editing work you're doing
I was never
now.
edited before. Well, it turns out now I've sold my house and I'm living with my daughter and son-in-law, and so is my ex-husband. So here I am.
This is like a TV pilot, I feel like.
So Dana was a New Yorker cartoonist, and he's long retired. But we decided one day that we'd start doing some cartoons together, and he thinks of the gags, and I've struggled to learn how to do gag drawing. It's so different, totally different.
What's different about it?
Well, you have to get everything into the picture to tell the story. It's one picture. You don't get to do a sequence. So and Dana, I was talking about being an editor. He edits me.
What's that like?
He tells me, you got to change this and do that and the other thing. And so it's really been fun now. I've just really enjoyed it.
And you're producing these for yourself or for
Well, we
the
put them on
general market?
Facebook.
Oh, I see.
Just for fun, you know. And there's another cartoonist who's been doing cartoons, and Dana feels very competitive that he's got to get some out,
That's good, though, a lot of times to keep you working.
It's a joke, though. I mean, we're just doing it for fun.
It's nice to be able to do work more for your own pleasure at this point, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. I've been doing these drawings in pencil, because I don't have an ink technique, for gag cartooning. So I've been doing them in pencil, and then using pencil shading, and it is so hard to get a smooth surface when I just take it and scan it and put it on the computer and then send it out. But it's really been a struggle for me to learn how to do that. And I think I finally figured it out.
Yeah.
So
new skills to develop even at this point in your career.
It was fun.
That's interesting. Well, I wonder, looking back over your career, do you ever look back and see yourself in your own work, or see parts of yourself revealed maybe that you didn't expect were there?
No, I can't say that I do.
No?
I do know that there's one interesting thing to me. You mentioned that I did that book that had to do with Gnostic scripture.
Right.
I went into comics like blindly, you know, just sort of sleepwalking. I had no idea why I was doing it. And somewhere along the line, I began to be interested. I went to NYU. I went to college at age 50.
Right.
And I came across this a course on Faust, this myth of Faust. And the first book that we read was this little original version of the legend. And I thought it was full of symbols and strange imagery and stuff. And I said, this has to be saying something other than it appears to be saying. And so I did a paper on it while I was in college and discovered as I went along that it was really a coded compendium of Gnostic scripture. The very stuff that had been unearthed at Nag Hammadi, Egypt, about 10 years earlier. And when I began to work on it, the first English translation of all those books came out. And so I started to read them, and I thought, that's what this story is. It's the same story. And so I began to work on it, and I worked on it for like 30 years before I published the book.
Really?
Because I was drawing, you know, and doing other things too. But it occurred, the thing that struck me so much is that I went into comics blindly, but the imagery and the essential story of comics is the same thing as what the Faust book was dealing with in code. It was like it's alchemy and tantric yoga, and the processes and the imagery are all the same, and the mythology of the hero savior who comes down to earth to save mankind,
Right.
you know, to bring the truth and so on. And I realized then, and when you think about comics, it's all alchemy. I mean, these characters are constantly changing, interchanging. They're all interchangeable, and they're all zapped by something. The way you know, the way the fire heats up.
The forms aren't static, right?
Yeah,
They
that's
morph
right.
or
They're constantly changing forms.
evolve, right?
So I mean, if comic book heroes are shamans, you know, they're all. It's the same thing.
Right.
So I discovered that I'd just gone into that area in the
Right.
wrong place. I should have.
Do you think comics,
Go on.
modern myths of comics, primed you for that in some way?
Maybe it may. I'm not sure. It's such a strange coincidence. And I only, you know, I tend to wish that I'd gone to college very
Right,
early.
because you
and
put
gotten
yourself
into
through
that
school
sooner, yeah.
eventually, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a kind of an interesting discovery that I made.
Well, thank you for that. And now we've got time for a little Q&A with our studio audience here. So we're going to take some questions. Yeah?
Ramona, you talk about alchemy. Can you explain, using the Metamorpho figurine, what you were designing there and whether different parts mean, or do you even know what was going on with Bob Haney's original script? Like, what is that character? I was looking at that leg, and it looks like a wooden leg, and you're saying it's not a wooden leg. So,
Well, I mean, if you think about it, what are the four elements? Fire, air, earth, and water.
okay.
And maybe
So it's the
metal.
Fantastic Four in one
Yes,
character.
here's the basic elements. But when I designed it, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, the first thing, I got together with Bob and George, and we tried to figure out what he should look like. And the first thing I did was put him in a cape and a mask and all that, and I thought, that's never going to work. So then I finally figured out that he should, if he's going to change his body all the time, he shouldn't have clothes on, you know, because it would interfere. So I got that far, and then I knew there was going to be 4 different parts of him. And beyond that, you know, fire, air, earth, and water. Well, he was dripping. One leg was dripping. And one leg, that's about...
And the color scheme, did you come up with the color scheme as well?
No, never.
Okay.
No, I didn't color it.
And then it's all metastasized in his head, I guess?
Yeah.
Which is like the 5th part of that design.
Yeah, well then, you know, he was maimed in the pyramid,
Right.
so he had to come out looking weird.
The other question I have is, there's this great picture of you looking into the camera,
Yeah.
and I don't remember what year that
I was
if
making
anybody.
a face, I
You're
think.
kind of making a face, and
Yeah.
you're sitting in a room
Yeah.
with like 4 or 5 other men.
Yeah.
Everyone's dressed really nicely. I guess you had to wear a suit to
That's
draw
the way
comics
it
back
used to
then.
be.
Can you explain anything about that picture in that moment and what it's like to be a female cartoonist in those days?
Well, they were very polite, I must say. The first time I walked in that room, there was a silence. You know, it was like, who is this creature, you know, that walked in, because there weren't any, there were no women around. And, but everybody was always very nice to me. People always asked me, what was it like? And everybody was just, they treated me like they would anybody else. They were respectful and, you know, helpful. So, but that particular picture, I don't know, maybe it was because somebody was there with a camera this particular day, and there was, all the guys were there. It was Mort and George and Jack Schiff and Murray, yeah. And
there's something palpable though in your face. I don't know why, and maybe I'm reading
I
into
was
it
young.
as well. That's it. You're
that
young.
made a difference. Yeah, I used to go, I mean, I never knew anybody. I would go in there and make corrections and then leave, you know. It's like Marie Severin was part of Marvel, you know, she lived up there. So my experience was totally different.
And were there any other female cartoonists you hung out with, or you just came in, delivered the job, and left?
There weren't any. No, there was a couple of women who did coloring, but and people used to ask me if I knew Marie all the time, and I never did. And I never met her until in 1995 at a convention. They sat us together, and then we hit it off. You know, it was a shame. I wish I'd known her all those years. So, yeah, we were the only ones.
My name's Shaquille, and just a couple of questions. If there was a particular time that you didn't enjoy drawing a character or a piece from any company?
I'm really having trouble hearing
He
you.
wanted to know if there was ever a time where there was a character that you didn't enjoy drawing, or something, a company you worked for, a piece that you didn't enjoy at all working on.
Oh, Freedom Fighters. Yeah, Freedom Fighters. I hated that feature. Oh my God. It's like they gathered these characters from all over the place and threw them together in a hodgepodge, and it was a cast of thousands. It was just horrible to draw. And then Vince Scaletta was inking. On top of that.
Insult to injury.
I kept begging Murray or Paul Levis to get me off of it, you know. And I said, get somebody else to do this. And he said, no, you've got a style, you know, you have to do it. And it's the first time I ever learned that I had a style. But no, that was it. I mean, I hated that thing. Oh my God.
Oh, and, sorry. Another one, you have any advice you would give us for keeping rights to our characters if it's
for what? For
keep rights to your characters.
Oh, I have I never owned any of them. I really wouldn't know. I mean, I missed out on getting the patent on Metamorpho. I heard that they do it every 29 years. You get a chance to do it, and I missed the deadline. So I can't give you any help on that at all. Just don't sign anything without a lawyer. I suppose that's the best advice I can give you.
Watch your invoices.
Yeah.
Ramona, I started reading Aquaman probably in 61 or 62, something like that, and I thought it was tremendous. And then I looked online, and you'd been doing it for maybe 100 issues of adventure comics. So I really only saw just the littlest part of it. I was wondering if Aquaman, the earlier adventures, have ever been collected anywhere that we could see.
I think that you mean the Aquaman ones?
Yes.
Yeah, they're in volumes now. There are 2 volumes out.
I thought they only started from the later part, though.
I don't think so. There's like 2. I mean, Nick Cardy is in half of the second one, I think, or maybe more than that. But there are an awful lot of issues. I really don't know. I mean, it never occurred to me.
To look into the
know.
collections. Well, that was my next question, actually. How did the handoff of the art chores for Aquaman work when you stopped doing it and Nick Cardy did?
Well, it wasn't Nick at first. I think somebody else did it before Nick did. But they decided to give him that's when when I had my daughter, and I knew I had to quit. And they decided to give him his own book. So I did the first cover. People tell me I did the first issue. I don't think I did. But, you know, it's a long time ago. It's hard to really remember.
So
but
it was your decision, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had to quit. Otherwise, I probably would have done the book. So, you know. But I think somebody other than Nick drew it at first, and then Nick took over, and then other people. So that's all I know.
Ramona, when you were doing Brenda Starr, did your social circle change to other syndicated cartoonists and any interesting characters or stories, if you did?
Did my social circle change?
Yeah, you start hanging, instead of being around comic book artists.
I never was around comic book artists. I only went in once a month, you know, and the only people I ever met were the editors that I worked with. And I really didn't know anybody. I mostly hung out with the New Yorker people that my husband was, you know, involved with,
including
out in Connecticut.
Including when you did Brenda Starr? I mean, I'm just...
Yeah, well, then I was in New York. No, it didn't make any difference. That was even more isolated than I was when I was doing comics. Huh. No, my social life has never had anything to do with my drawing.
Any good New Yorker cartoonist? Any funny anecdotes about hanging out with New Yorker cartoonists?
Oh, they were such fun. I mean, they were really such smart guys, you know, and such really entertaining, you know, good company. Every one of them. They were much more serious. You know, they were serious people, a lot of them. Yeah. And they're not. Well, I haven't known many comic book writers, but these people were all writing their own gags, you know, and so that they were more into literary circles, you know, literary things. But yeah, it was a privilege to have known all these guys, a lot of whom are dead now. They were an unusual bunch of people. It was a gift. I hate to have Dana hear me say this, because I'm always running down the New Yorker when he's.
What advice would you have to, you know, aspiring comic artists, if you could give them a takeaway, that are either studying at school or working on their own comics at home?
Well, I think it's I don't know. I mean, people learn in their own way, but I really do think it helps to go to art school and get a broad background. And then you can do more. You're more flexible. I mean, I think some kids just start out drawing buttons and, you know, bells and whistles, and they don't really know how to draw a figure. They're just interested in all the details of the costumes, and I think that's a mistake. You need to have this. I mean, I sound like my father now, because he used to say, "Learn to draw, kid."
The foundation,
then, yeah.
put the foundation.
But I think, you know, in my experience has been that it works, you know, and that's the best advice I could give anybody.
Well, thank you so much, Ramona. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Edie Nugent, and if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to the Dare2Draw YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.